There was a Monday morning Marcus would never forget. Not because something dramatic happened, because nothing did. He sat at his desk, same chair, same screen, same coffee going cold before he could finish it. And he looked around the office, really looked at it, and thought, is this it? He was 29, stable job in logistics, decent salary, a small apartment he never really decorated because decorating it felt too permanent. A gym membership he paid for more than he used, a savings account with $22,000 sitting in it like a question he kept avoiding. He wasn't miserable exactly, that was a strange part. He just felt like he was living someone else's life on a slight delay. And that morning, something shifted. He opened the new tab, not for work. He typed, cheapest countries to travel solo. That was the beginning. Within 6 weeks, he had handed in his resignation. His manager stared at him the way people stare at someone who just said something they can't unhear. His mom called 3 times that evening. His friends thought it was a phase, the kind of thing you talk about but never actually do. Marcus did it. One-way flight to Thailand, $22,000 in savings, no return date, no 5-year plan, just a bag, a carry-on, and the quiet electric feeling of someone who has just made a decision they cannot take back. He told everyone he was finally living. And the thing is, in those first weeks, he had the evidence to prove it. Warm water, cheap street food, sunsets that had no interest in your job title or your credit score. He'd wake up with no alarm and just exist for a moment before deciding what the day would be. He was spending around $1,400 a month. Back home, that didn't even cover rent. He did the math slowly one evening over a beer that cost him 80 cents. At this rate, he had over a year. Possibly longer if he stayed disciplined, possibly much longer if he kept moving through cheaper countries. He video called friends back home, held up his phone to show them the view, watched their faces shifting to something between admiration and the feeling they couldn't quite name. He felt ahead of something, like he'd spotted an exit everyone else had missed. Average Joe watching from the sidelines might have said the same thing. Looks like the guy cracked the code, walked away from the machine before the machine used him up. And that feeling, that quiet, golden feeling of being ahead, is exactly what made what came next so hard to see coming. If this story is already pulling you in, a like genuinely helps this channel keep going. Marcus hit Southeast Asia like someone who had just been released from something. Thailand first, then Vietnam, then Cambodia. Each country cheaper than the last, each morning a little lighter than the one before. He wasn't checking emails, wasn't sitting in traffic, wasn't watching a clock count down to a lunch break he'd eat at his desk anyway. He was moving, and moving felt like progress. But somewhere around month 3, something quiet happened. The novelty started having an edge, not enough to alarm him, just enough to notice. The temples were still beautiful, the food was still incredible, but he'd catch himself sitting in a hostel common room surrounded by people, feeling something he couldn't immediately name. He pushed it down, booked a bus to the next city. That's the thing about movement. It's very easy to confuse it with growth. His savings were holding up. He'd gotten smarter about spending, cooking some meals, taking overnight buses instead of flights, staying in dorms when the private rooms felt indulgent. He was proud of the discipline. He told himself this was part of the adventure. By month 5, he had made it to Europe. Portugal, then Spain, then a slow train through southern France. This was the part of the trip he dreamed about the longest, the romantic part, the cinematic part. It cost more than he planned. Western Europe wasn't Southeast Asia. The 80-cent beers were gone. Hostels that once cost $8 a night were now $30. Dinners that felt reasonable added up fast when you were eating out every single day because you had no kitchen and no base. He rechecked his savings account one evening in a Barcelona cafe. The number was lower than he expected. Not alarming, but lower. He did some quick mental math and felt the first cold edge of something he didn't want to name yet. He closed the app, ordered another coffee, and told himself he'd recalibrate in the morning. He didn't recalibrate in the morning. He booked a flight to Morocco instead, because that's what the trip demanded. That's what the version of himself he'd built online, the one his followers were watching, would do next. And here's where the false safety really starts to crack. Because Marcus had quietly built an audience. Nothing massive, a few thousand people following his journey on social media. People who commented things like, living vicariously through you, and you're such an inspiration. And those comments did something to him he didn't fully understand yet. They made the trip feel like a performance he couldn't walk off stage from. He wasn't just traveling anymore. He was maintaining a version of himself that existed for other people. And maintaining that version cost money he was pretending he still had. Back home, his old colleagues got promotions he would have been in line for. His closest friend got engaged. Life kept moving in the places he left behind. He just didn't know it yet. Morocco was beautiful. He posted every bit of it. The markets, the colors, the rooftops at golden hour. Each photo chosen carefully, each caption written to sound effortless, like a man completely at peace with the decision he made 14 months ago in a gray office on a forgettable Monday. But the savings account didn't care about the captions. By month 15, Marcus had under $4,000 left. He sat with that number for a long time one night in a small riad in Marrakesh, the kind of place that looked expensive but wasn't. He'd gotten good at finding those, at making things look like more than they were. $4,000. He ran the numbers properly this time. No rounding up, no optimistic assumptions. If he kept moving, he had maybe 3 months. If he found somewhere ultra cheap and stopped pretending, maybe 4. And then what? He hadn't thought about the and then what. Not really. He'd assumed something would appear, a remote job, an opportunity, a sign from the universe that the decision was right and the path would reveal itself. The universe wasn't offering anything that evening. He opened his phone and scrolled back home. His friend's engagement photos, a colleague's LinkedIn post about a new senior role, his younger sister had just bought her first flat. Everyone had kept going. He felt something he hadn't expected to feel on the trip of his life. He felt left behind. And that's the moment the whole thing cracked open. Not the money, not the loneliness, not even the exhaustion of living out of a bag for over a year. It was the realization that arrived quietly, without drama, sitting alone in the beautiful city he didn't feel anymore. He hadn't been chasing something. He'd been running from something. The desk, the sameness, the quiet fear that if he stayed still long enough, he'd have to look at the parts of himself he'd never dealt with. The traveling hadn't fixed any of that. It just kept him moving fast enough that he never had to sit with it. Until now. He flew home 6 weeks later, moved back into his mom's spare room, took a job that paid less than the one he'd left, and for the first 3 weeks, he could barely talk about the trip without feeling something complicated rise in his chest. But here's the part that doesn't make it into the Instagram posts. A year later, Marcus said it was the most important thing he ever did. Not because it worked, but because it showed him exactly what he was avoiding, and you can't fix something you've never faced. Average Joe never left his city that year, but he watched Marcus come back and quietly thought, maybe the bravest thing isn't always the biggest leap. Sometimes it's what you do when you land. If Marcus's story hit close to home, even a little, you're not alone. Most of us have a version of that Monday morning. That feeling of looking around and thinking, is this actually my life? The question isn't whether to chase something different. The question is whether you know what you're chasing and what you might be running from. If this story made you think, made you feel something, or made you see your own life a little differently, hit the like button. It takes 1 second, and it genuinely helps this channel reach people who need to hear stories like this. Drop a comment below. Have you ever made a big financial decision driven more by emotion than logic? We read every single one. If you're new here, welcome. This channel is not about getting rich quick. It's not about guru advice or magic formulas. It's about real human stories around money, decisions, and the psychology behind both. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you know someone who quit everything to chase a dream, or someone who's thinking about it, share this with them. Not to warn them, just so they feel a little less alone in the question. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next story.